everything. Have you ever watched someone smile at you while secretly planning to take everything you've ever worked for? I have. And the worst part wasn't that it happened. It was who did it. My own mother. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten me. Instead, she waited until the most important day in our family's history. My younger sister's luxury wedding. More than 200 guests filled the grand ballroom. Judges, attorneys, business owners, politicians, people my mother had spent decades trying to impress. Then, right in front of all of them, she smiled, handed me a stack of legal papers, and said, "Sign these, and give your sister your penthouse as her wedding gift." The room became silent. Every eye turned toward me when I quietly said, "No." My mother's hand struck my face so hard that my diamond earring flew across the polished marble floor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone simply watched. They expected tears. They expected me to apologize. They expected me to surrender, just like I always had. Instead, I bent down, picked up my earring, placed it back into my ear, looked my mother directly in the eyes, and walked away. Exactly 48 minutes later, the woman my mother had spent years telling everyone was confused, frail, and mentally unfit, walked through those ballroom doors with one of Boston's most respected attorneys, and in his briefcase was the evidence that destroyed every single lie my family had built over the last 3 years. But to understand how everything fell apart, you have to go back to where it all really began, 3 years earlier. Back then, my life was simple. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. My name is Claire Bennett. At 31 years old, I owned a small interior design studio just outside Boston. It wasn't glamorous. Most mornings started with coffee that went cold before I remembered to drink it. Blueprints covered my desk. Paint samples filled every drawer. Some months I barely slept, trying to keep up with deadlines. But I loved every minute of it because every client, every project, every dollar I had earned myself. No family connections, no trust fund, no wealthy husband, just hard work. That alone made me different from the rest of my family. My younger sister, Sophia, had never needed to worry about money. She grew up believing expensive things simply appeared because we deserved them. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, private schools. Country clubs. Everything was normal to her. Our mother made sure of that. Victoria Bennett believed appearances were everything. She cared more about what strangers thought than how her own daughters felt if a family photo looked perfect. She considered herself a wonderful mother. Whether we were actually happy never seemed to matter. Growing up, I spent years trying to earn her approval. Straight A's, scholarships, long hours. Nothing was enough. Sophia only had to smile. And Mom called her perfect. I stopped competing years ago. It was exhausting. The only person who ever made me feel truly seen was my grandmother, Margaret Bennett. To everyone else, she was a retired law professor. To me, she was home every Sunday. Without fail, I'd drive across town carrying fresh tulips. She loved tulips, always yellow. She claimed they reminded her that even after the longest winter, spring always came back. We'd spend hours talking, sometimes about history, sometimes about architecture, sometimes about absolutely nothing. Those afternoons became my favorite part of every week. I never visited because I expected anything from her. I visited because she was the only member of my family who never asked me to become someone else. One rainy Tuesday evening, everything changed. My phone rang while I was finishing drawings for a kitchen renovation. The screen displayed one name, Grandma. I smiled before answering. Hi, Grandma. Claire, she said softly. I need you to listen, carefully. Something in her voice made me sit up. Immediately, she sounded calm, but unusually serious. I'm listening. I've updated my estate plan. I frowned. I've decided to leave my waterfront penthouse to you. For several seconds, I honestly thought I'd misunderstood her. Me. Yes. Why? She chuckled gently. Because you're the only person who never visits me, expecting something in return. My eyes filled with tears. She continued. You've shown me, year after year, what love actually looks like. I don't owe you anything. Grandma, I know. That's exactly why. You've earned it. I looked around my tiny apartment, half-finished sketches, paint cans, second-hand, furniture. Nothing about my life suggested I would ever own one of Boston's most valuable homes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She paused. Just promise me one thing, anything. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, never let someone convince you that you don't deserve what you've honestly received. At the time, I thought she was simply giving grandmotherly advice. I had no idea. She already knew a storm was coming, and that storm had my mother's name written all over it. Part 2. When my own family declared war for a little while, nothing happened. Life continued almost normally. I still visited Grandma every Sunday. I still worked 12-hour days building my design business. I still believed my family would eventually accept her decision. I couldn't have been more wrong. Just 3 weeks later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice sounded unusually sweet. Claire, sweetheart, why don't you come over for dinner tonight? That alone should have warned me. My mother never called just to spend time together. There was always a reason. Still, she was my mother. Part of me kept hoping things could get better. So that evening, I drove to my parents' beautiful brick home, overlooking Boston Harbor. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Perfect landscaping, luxury cars, fresh flowers, the picture-perfect family image. My mother worked so hard to maintain. The moment I stepped inside, I realized this wasn't dinner. It was an intervention. Dad sat quietly in his favorite leather chair. Sophia crossed her legs on the sofa, scrolling through her phone as if none of this mattered. Mom stood beside the fireplace, with her arms folded. No one smiled. No one offered me dinner. No one even asked how work was going. Sit down, my mother said. I obeyed. The silence felt heavy. Finally, Mom spoke. Your grandmother isn't thinking clearly anymore. I stared at her. What? She's getting older, Claire. Older people become confused. They make emotional decisions. I immediately understood where this conversation was going. I kept my voice calm. Grandma knows exactly what she wants. Sophia let out a dramatic sigh. You honestly don't think it's strange she left you everything? I never said everything, but the penthouse alone is worth millions. She leaned forward. Don't you think that's unfair? I looked directly at my sister. Life isn't always divided equally. It's about relationships. Mom's expression hardened. So you're admitting you manipulated her? I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe she'd just said that. I visited Grandma because I love her. No, Mom replied coldly. You visited because you knew she'd reward you. The accusation landed harder than I expected. Years of Sunday visits, birthday dinners, hospital appointments, long conversations, reduced to one ugly accusation. Dad finally spoke. His voice remained calm, almost rehearsed. Claire, perhaps the best solution would be selling the penthouse. Then everyone receives an equal share. I looked around the room. Not one person had asked what Grandma wanted. Not one person respected her choice. This wasn't about fairness. It was about money. I'm not selling anything, I answered. The room went silent. Mom's eyes narrowed. You'd choose property over your own family. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm choosing to respect Grandma's wishes. Sophia rolled her eyes. You're unbelievable. I've worked hard my entire life. I deserve opportunities too. I couldn't stop myself. You've never worked a full-time job. Her face immediately reddened. Mom stepped between us. Enough. Then she looked directly at me. If you don't fix this, there will be consequences. I stood. If respecting Grandma means losing this family, I guess I never really had one. Without another word, I walked out. That was the last peaceful day of my life. Within a week, the phone calls stopped. Family dinners stopped. Holiday invitations disappeared. Birthdays came and went without a single message. I found out about family vacations through social media. Photos filled with smiling faces, everyone together, everyone except me. When I asked Mom why nobody invited me, she answered casually, "We assumed you were too busy." Busy? No, I had simply become inconvenient. But isolation wasn't the worst part. The rumors were. Slowly, quietly. My mother began rewriting the story. According to her, I had manipulated an elderly woman. I had pressured Grandma. I had convinced her to cut everyone else out. People I'd known my entire life suddenly looked at me differently. Neighbors stopped smiling. Old family friends avoided eye contact. Even a longtime client nervously asked if everything she'd heard was true. That question broke something inside me. Not because strangers doubted me, because someone I trusted believed my mother over me. Still, I refused to fight publicly. I thought staying quiet would prove my innocence. I believed the truth would eventually speak for itself. I had no idea. Silence was exactly what my mother wanted. Every lie she told spread further. Every rumor became accepted as fact. And every week, she grew more confident. Meanwhile, Grandma became strangely distant. She still smiled whenever I visited. She still asked about my work. She still insisted I bring yellow tulips. But sometimes, I'd catch her staring silently through the window. Lost in thought, almost afraid one Sunday, I finally asked, "Grandma, is something wrong?" She smiled, just enough to reassure me. I'm simply getting older, but her eyes told a different story. There was something she wasn't saying, something much bigger, something she believed she had to carry alone. I wanted to push further. Instead, I respected her silence. Looking back now, that was probably my biggest mistake. Because while I believed the family drama was finally settling down, my mother was quietly preparing something far more dangerous. She wasn't planning to argue anymore. She wasn't planning to negotiate. She was planning to take what she believed belonged to her, no matter who got hurt. Part 3. The invitation that was really a trap. Nearly 2 years passed. On the outside, life looked like it was finally becoming peaceful. My design studio was growing. New clients kept arriving through referrals. I hired my first full-time assistant. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was actually building something. But my family remained silent. No birthday calls. No Thanksgiving invitation. No Christmas dinner. No simple text asking how I was doing. It hurt. Not every day, but enough that I stopped checking my phone whenever holidays came around. Eventually, I accepted something painful. Sometimes people don't stop loving you. They simply decide you're no longer useful. Then, one cold December afternoon, everything changed again. The mail arrived while I was reviewing furniture layouts for a waterfront condominium project. Most of it was ordinary. Bills, catalogs, client paperwork. Then I noticed a thick ivory envelope. My name was written in elegant gold calligraphy. I already knew who it was from. Before opening it, before reading a single word, something inside me whispered, "Don't!" But I opened it anyway. Inside was a luxurious wedding invitation. Sophia Bennett and Ethan Collins request the honor of your presence. The ceremony would take place at one of Boston's most exclusive hotels. Black tie, over 200 guests. Every important person my mother had spent years trying to impress would be there. I stared at the invitation for several long moments. After everything that had happened, why invite me now? The answer came later that evening. My phone rang. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Claire. Her voice sounded unbelievably warm, almost affectionate. I hope you received Sophia's invitation. I did. I'm so happy. We've all been thinking. This wedding is the perfect opportunity for our family to finally heal. Heal? The word almost made me laugh. Healing usually begins with an apology. I'd never received one, not a single one. She continued speaking before I could answer. You know how important family is. I've been praying we could all move forward. There it was again. The perfect performance. If someone had overheard the conversation, they would have believed she was the world's most loving mother. Then, her tone shifted ever so slightly. There is one small thing I'd like us to discuss. Of course there was. I closed my eyes. What is it? The penthouse. There it was. Again. Always the penthouse. Always the money. Claire, your sister is starting a new life. Imagine how wonderful it would be if you surprised everyone. You could transfer the apartment as your wedding gift. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't speak. She was serious. After years of lies, years of humiliation, years of treating me like a stranger, she still believed I'd simply hand over the one thing Grandma had intentionally left to me. No, the word came quietly, firmly, without anger, just truth. Silence filled the call. Then, my mother's voice became cold. Ice cold. Think carefully before answering. I already have. Claire, you're embarrassing this family. I disagree. I'm respecting Grandma. You're choosing property over blood. No, I'm choosing respect over manipulation. She exhaled sharply. You've become selfish. I smiled sadly. Maybe. Or maybe I've finally learned how to say no. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. I expect you to attend the wedding. I'll be there. And I expect you to reconsider. I won't. She disconnected without saying goodbye. I placed the phone on my desk. For several minutes, I simply sat there, staring through the office window. Snowflakes drifted slowly across the city. People hurried down the sidewalks carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. The world continued normally. Mine suddenly didn't. Something felt wrong. Not just uncomfortable, dangerous. It wasn't the request. I'd expected another request eventually. It was the confidence in her voice. She sounded certain, as though the decision had already been made, as though all I had left to do was sign my name. That night, sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined walking into that ballroom. Hundreds of strangers watching, my mother smiling, Sophia celebrating, and somehow, I was at the center of it all. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mother, it was Grandma, Claire. Her voice was calm, but underneath it, I heard urgency. I need you to listen carefully. I'm listening. If anything unusual happens at that wedding, I want you to call my attorney immediately." I sat upright. "What?" She slowly repeated a phone number. "Save it." "I don't understand." "You don't have to. Just promise me." "I promise." She became quiet. Then she spoke again. "No matter what happens, don't sign anything. Nothing. No matter who asks. No matter who pressures you. No matter who's watching." My heart began beating faster. "Grandma, what aren't you telling me?" There was a long silence. Finally, she whispered something I will never forget. "Some people will do anything for money, even if it destroys their own family." Before I could ask another question, she ended the call. I stared at my phone. Questions raced through my mind. Why was she frightened? Why did she already have an attorney waiting? What could possibly happen at a wedding? I didn't know it then, but Grandma had already uncovered a secret so devastating. It had the power to destroy everything my mother had spent decades building. And in just 7 days, that secret would explode in front of everyone. Part 4. The wedding day and the moment everything changed. March 18th. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear blue skies and a cold spring breeze that swept through downtown Boston. Most people wake up on wedding days feeling excited. I woke up feeling something entirely different, a feeling I couldn't explain. A quiet voice deep inside me kept whispering, "Something is going to happen today." I stood in front of my bedroom mirror for several minutes, trying to decide what to wear. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I already knew I would be judged. If I wore something expensive, people would whisper that I'd used Grandma's money. If I dressed too simply, they'd say I was embarrassing the family. There was no winning, so I chose something that felt like me. A simple navy blue evening dress. Minimal jewelry, natural makeup. Nothing flashy. Nothing designed to attract attention. I wasn't there to compete. I was there because, despite everything, Sophia was still my sister. Or at least, I wanted to believe she still was. The hotel looked absolutely breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above marble floors. Fresh white orchids decorated every entrance. A string quartet played softly in the background. Every corner reflected elegance. Every detail reflected money. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers hurried from guest to guest. Champagne flowed before the ceremony had even begun. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Judges, business executives, doctors, partners from prestigious law firms, old Boston families, whose names appeared on university buildings and hospital wings. Exactly the kind of audience my mother loved. To her, this wasn't just a wedding, it was a performance, and every guest was part of the audience. I had barely stepped inside when my father approached. "Claire." His smile felt forced. "I'm glad you came." I smiled politely. I almost didn't. He looked uncomfortable, as though he wanted to say something meaningful, but couldn't find the words. Instead, he simply nodded. "Enjoy the evening." Then he disappeared into the crowd. That conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. It perfectly summarized our relationship. A few moments later, Sophia walked toward me, wearing an elegant white gown that looked as though it belonged on the cover of a bridal magazine. She looked beautiful, confident, radiant. For just 1 second, I forgot everything that had happened between us. She hugged me. The embrace lasted only a moment, just enough for photographers to capture the image of two loving sisters. When she stepped back, her smile changed. It became calculated, almost rehearsed. "I'm so happy you came," she said. "I wouldn't miss your wedding." She glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to hear. Then she quietly asked, You brought the paperwork, right? I blinked. What paperwork? Her smile disappeared. The transfer documents. I stared at her. What transfer documents? For the penthouse. My stomach tightened. You really believed Mom? Sophia frowned. She told us everything was already arranged. It isn't. I never agreed. Her expression hardened. But Ethan and I already made plans. What kind of plans? We've already told everyone we're moving into the penthouse after the honeymoon. For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. You announced that publicly. She shrugged. Mom said it was settled. No, it wasn't. It isn't, and it never will be. Her entire face changed. The warm bride vanished. Standing in front of me now was someone I'd barely recognized anymore. You don't even need that apartment. I do. You live alone? Yes. You don't entertain wealthy clients. I don't have to. She crossed her arms. So you're really choosing a building over your own sister. I looked directly into her eyes. No, I'm choosing to honor Grandma's wishes. Without another word, she walked away, but before disappearing into the crowd, she turned back one final time. Mom isn't going to let this go. Those words echoed in my mind for the next hour. Mom isn't going to let this go. I wandered through the reception, trying to calm myself. Every conversation felt uncomfortable. Every smile seemed rehearsed. Every glance lingered just a little too long. Something wasn't right. People looked at me, as though they already knew something I didn't. Then it happened. One of my mother's longtime friends approached me with a champagne glass in her hand. She smiled politely. So, I hear you're giving Sophia the penthouse tonight. I froze. I'm sorry? She laughed softly. Oh, I wasn't supposed to know. I thought Victoria told everyone. At that exact moment, everything became painfully clear. My mother hadn't just invited me to the wedding. She had already told every important guest that I would publicly hand over my inheritance. She'd built an entire story around a decision I'd never made. A trap. A carefully planned, public trap. If I refused, I'd look selfish. If I agreed, I'd lose everything. Either way, she believed she'd win. I suddenly remembered Grandma's warning. Don't sign anything, no matter who's watching. A chill ran through my body. This wasn't going to be a family conversation. This was going to become a public performance. And somehow, I had become the main attraction. I quietly stepped outside onto the hotel balcony. The cold air hit my face instantly. For the first time all evening, I could finally breathe. Boston's skyline stretched across the harbor. Beautiful, peaceful. Completely opposite of the storm building inside that ballroom. I rested both hands on the stone railing and closed my eyes. Then, my phone vibrated. It was Grandma. I answered immediately. Claire, I'm here. I need you to stay calm. I already know something's wrong. She became silent for a moment. Then she said the words that made my heart stop. Your mother has been preparing this day for months. I gripped the railing tightly. What do you mean? I don't know exactly what she's planned, but I know she intends to corner you publicly. Whatever happens, remember your promise. Don't sign anything. And if she forces the issue, call my attorney immediately. I swallowed hard. I understand. I love you, Claire. I love you too. The call ended. I slipped my phone back into my purse, took one long, steady breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked back toward the ballroom. I had no idea that in less than 30 minutes, my mother would slap me in front of more than 200 people, and the truth she had spent years hiding would finally begin to surface. Part 5. The truth that set me free for a moment. The ballroom was completely silent. No music, no conversation, no laughter. More than 200. People stood frozen, staring at me after my mother's hand struck my face. My cheek burned, but somehow, the pain wasn't what hurt the most. It was finally realizing that my own mother cared more about appearances than she ever cared about me. I slowly bent down, picked up my earring, straightened it carefully, placed it back into my ear. Then I looked directly into my mother's eyes. My voice was calm, steady, almost emotionless. That was the last time you'll ever put your hands on me. Without another word, I turned around, walked through the stunned crowd, past the photographers, past the orchestra, past the luxury decorations that suddenly looked meaningless, and left the ballroom. No tears, no screaming, no revenge, just peace. The moment I reached the hotel lobby, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I dialed the number Grandma had given me. The phone rang once. Webster Legal. "This is Claire Bennett." There was a brief pause. Then the receptionist answered quietly. "We've been expecting your call. My grandmother asked me to tell you. It's time. I understand. Our team is already on the way." The call ended. For the first time that evening, I smiled. Not because I was happy, because I finally understood. Grandma hadn't prepared for a fight. She had prepared for the truth. 45 minutes later. The ballroom doors opened. Everyone turned. Grandma Margaret walked inside. She moved slowly with her cane, but every step radiated quiet confidence. Beside her walked attorney Jonathan Webster, carrying a thick leather briefcase. My mother's face instantly lost its color. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. "Mom," she forced a nervous smile. "What are you doing here?" Grandma stopped in the center of the ballroom. "I came because it's time everyone hears the truth." The room became silent once again. Attorney Webster opened his briefcase. He placed several folders on a nearby table. Then Grandma looked directly at every guest. "For 3 years, my daughter has told people I was confused, that I didn't understand my own decisions. Tonight, I want everyone to know I was never confused. I knew exactly what I was doing." She turned toward me. "I gave my penthouse to Claire because she earned my trust, because she showed me love when nobody else had time." I felt tears fill my eyes, not from sadness, from finally being seen. Then Grandma's expression changed. Her voice became firm. "There is something else everyone deserves to know." Attorney Webster handed her another folder. Several guests leaned forward. "You've all heard stories about Claire manipulating me. None of them are true. The real manipulation came from someone else." She slowly looked toward my mother. The room followed her gaze. 3 years ago, I discovered that my daughter had secretly forged documents related to one of my investment properties. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Mom immediately stepped forward. "That's a lie." "It isn't." Attorney Webster calmly held up certified forensic reports. Independent handwriting experts confirmed the signatures were forged. The evidence has already been submitted to the proper authorities. The ballroom exploded into whispers. People looked at Mom, then at Grandma, then back at me. Everything my mother had spent years building, her perfect reputation, her perfect image, collapsed within minutes. Sophia stood frozen. She looked from our mother to Grandma, then to me. Tears streamed down her face. "Claire." I didn't know. I looked at her for a long moment. "I believe you didn't know everything, but you chose to believe the worst about me." She lowered her head. "I should have asked. You should have." Neither of us spoke again. Some wounds need time before they can heal. My father finally stepped forward. For the first time, he didn't hide behind silence. He looked directly at me. I'm sorry. I failed you. I should have listened. I nodded slowly. I hope one day you become the father I needed. But today, I'm choosing peace. Grandma smiled proudly. That's exactly why I trusted you. She took my hand. You never fought to win. You only fought to protect what was right. At that moment, I realized something. The penthouse was never the greatest gift she'd given me. The greatest gift was teaching me my own worth. No one could take that away. Not with lies. Not with manipulation. Not with fear. Over the following months, life slowly changed. My design business continued to grow. Clients came because of my work, not because of my family name. I surrounded myself with people who respected honesty, people who celebrated my success instead of resenting it. Every Sunday, Grandma and I still shared lunch together, just like we always had, only now, there were no secrets between us one evening. As we watched the sunset from the balcony of the penthouse, she smiled and quietly said, "You know what real wealth is, Claire?" I smiled back. No. She squeezed my hand. It's waking up every morning, knowing you never had to betray yourself to make someone else comfortable. Those words stayed with me. They still do, because the greatest victory wasn't keeping the penthouse. It wasn't exposing the lies. It wasn't watching my mother's reputation fall apart. The greatest victory was finally choosing myself. If you're watching this today, and someone has convinced you that protecting your peace makes you selfish, please remember this. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Walking away from manipulation isn't betrayal. And saying no to people who only love you when you obey them is sometimes the bravest decision you'll ever make. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace.